In many studio scenarios, when a snare obnoxiously rings out, an engineer will often grab a towel and drape it over the drum. It gives you this punchy thud without all that annoying sharpness. This also works like a charm for toms and kick drums too. I remember back in high school, my friends and I used to stuff the kick drum with coats and scarves to kill that boomy resonance we heard in rehearsal spaces. In the digital world, it's not so easy. I find myself scrolling through endless drum samples, none quite right because of the weird resonance or reverb baked into the sample. I've shown you previously how we trim the transient by the warp forward method, but it's not enough this time. We want to affect the tone as well. If only there was a virtual drum towel. We're going to design a rack that mimics how a towel dampens a drum, keeping the attack and the transient intact, but without making it clicky. And we'll want to tonally enhance the drum to make sure it doesn't sound dead or hollow, as if we've mic'd it up in a nice room as well. Ready? Let's dive in. Let's start with an effects rack. Limiter at the end, just to be safe, and I think the easiest thing to create is going to be the muffled sound of a towel on a drum, right? So you guessed it, we're going to start off with a little EQ for the initial muffle. Once the low, mid, high, and output are mapped to the macro muffle, we're going to invert the ranges of the low, mids, and highs, set the gain to 1 dB, set the low shelf to -5, then -3.2, and the high shelf to -7 dB. As we increase the muffle pot, we'll see a slight filter applied to the EQ. And I think we can use drum bus, which is going to work nice as a transient editor, but I think we'll also adjust it in a way that makes the drum feel like it's either not covered, partially covered, or totally covered by the towel. So let's use the dry wet knob in conjunction to the transient editor. So the second macro is now mapped to transients and the dry wet, but we now need to go to map, go to transients and set this to 0 and -1, and then invert this range. Perfect. By the way, if this is all jargon and you don't have time to sneeze or follow along with this tutorial, then just head over to the Patreon where the drum towel is available as a rack for you to download. Let's hear the snare without our macros, and then with our muffle, and then with our towel at 100% wet. Okay, now here's the really exciting part. Stick around until the end for the absolute game changer, but what we're going to do now is assign an envelope follower to the auto filter. This mimics how a towel reacts when you hit the drum, lifting it slightly on impact and then rolling that towel back down with gravity. By quickly adjusting the EQ, we can replicate this effect digitally, add in some organic presence to the sound. Map both bypasses and then envelope follower to filter frequency. We'll probably want to delay the EQ start time so we hear the initial sound first before the towel kind of falls back over the drum. Let's map delay to our dampen delay macro. I'm going to edit my bypass options, and then I'm going to set envelope follower delay to about 90 milliseconds. Here it is without and with. This already works tremendously for the snare and for the kick, but for toms there are more overtones and hum. We suddenly have that resonance creeping back into the mix, so I think we'll add a noise gate after in the chain, which is going to silence the sound when it falls under a threshold. I spoke about thresholds in a previous video just recently, everything you need to know about compression if you're in need of a guide. Right now my gate bypass and release time is mapped to the remove hum macro. As I increase that macro knob, the release time is reduced and the device turns on. You can hear those overtones with the tom, but increase that remove hum macro and that hum is completely gone. Now, I know I talk about realism a lot, and I'm probably driving you insane with that, but this part is crucial. Adding a bit of snare bleed with the vocoder can make a huge difference. Think about it. We've trimmed back all of these overtones, but we want our drum samples to sound in keeping with the same space. What normally happens is you record your kick close mic'd, and you get a little bit of snare noise in your kick, in your tom, in your cymbals. So adding a little bit of that snare noise back, or a little bit of white noise with the vocoder, is going to glue your kit together, making them feel way more real and human. So we're going to start by mapping our release time and our dry wet of the vocoder over to our snare bleed macro. We're going to set release time to about 650 milliseconds and our dry wet to 40.4%. We've taken so much away from the snare already, and doing this to each drum of the kit might make things feel a little bit lifeless. So if that's not what you're going for, I want you to be able to add a little bit of that room sound back into the kit. You see, when you download multiple samples from different packs, they all have different reverb assigned, or some without reverb at all. So adding in a little bit of reverb with the same device makes everything, again, way more cohesive. We don't want any unnecessary rumbles, so let's also add an EQ. Okay, this is my favorite part. Let's make this better than it was. Just like a drum tower is a time-saving studio fix, Mixia from DistroKid, today's sponsor, is ideal for speedy mastering. Let the AI listen to your track, choose whether to make it more or less dynamic and adjust the warmth, and boom, you have a competitively loud song in moments. You can get 7% off your first year and support the show at no extra cost with the link in the description. Let's get back to the video. Let's make this better than it was. Let's give your samples some options for you to really give it character. I started gravitating to this idea when I used a Neural DSP plugin and I was able to adjust the mic positions on an amp. If we were actually recording this snare and actually popping a towel on it, we would most likely close mic this kit. So let's add a device that allows you to change the mic position in a physical space. The best tool for this, I think, is going to be Corpus. We could also use Cabinet, but I'm going to use Corpus in this example. The kick tight algorithm works really well. I've adjusted the decay, material, and resonance a little bit, but we're going to macro assign the wet and the tune, which will essentially be like our mic position. Moving the mic closer to the center of the drum will provide more bass, and to the edge, more treble. I created some presets for drum tower, so here's some sounds with and without the device. Without, and the snare with the preset. What about the kick drum? Here's just the sample alone. And with the drum tower kick preset. And what about the floor tom? Super overtony. With the preset. I've even made some fun stuff for hi-hats and percussion. So there we have it, guys. Something I'm truly excited and proud to bring to your attention. And I don't think anyone else has covered this on YouTube. And it all feeds into making your digital experience a little bit more analog and hands-on at no expense to your time. If you like that kind of vibe, you should check out last week's video where I kind of transformed the Ableton space into an entire analog studio. It's really cool. I think you'll get a lot from it. Like I said, you can download this and over 200 other tools and templates at the Patreon. I hugely appreciate you swinging by, and I'll catch you next time.